snacks and everything, we can get started, and those that are getting snacks can just listen and participate in a few minutes whenever we sit down. This evening, we're continuing on with our lesson in the book of Samuel, 1 Samuel chapter 4. We'll be looking at chapter 4, 1 Samuel chapter 4, 1 through 7 and verse 17. Just for a follow-up and recap on what was going on. The people Samuel was going to be one of the last judges that's been appointed because the people wanted a king after this. And Eli was the priest, and he had a couple of sons who were definitely sinning in the eyes of the Lord. Do you remember what all his sons were doing? Eli's sons?
Everything they were doing.
Everything they were doing.
Stealing meat from the temple.
Stealing meat from the temple. Messing with the women. And disrespecting the Lord in general. Sinning against God. That's right. And Brother Eli, what was he doing? Sitting back watching. And participate. Really, if he was eating food, he was participating, right? That's right. Take a part of it, that's right. And so we have an opening thought this afternoon. You know, the Bible says that the wages of sin is death. So our first question, our first thought and our first question is, and you can read it, it says, in your opinion, what crime deserves a severe punishment? There are all kinds of crimes that get committed. And if you look at the 6 o'clock news, 6:30 news, you're going to see at least 5 listed, just from the 6 o'clock news. So are there crimes that should have more severe punishment than others? In general. Through the judicial system.
Yes.
There are. Like what?
Well, murder does not constitute, the punishment for murder and punishment for, they tossing a cup out the window will be different in the court of man.
Okay.
In God's eyes, it's all against the law. No matter how small or how large. But in man's, in the judicial system that we live under, of course you're going to have, to punish it.
Okay. Now the next thing, since there's different degrees of punishment for different crimes, do you know what capital punishment is?
Yes.
The death penalty. Do we all in this room, who all does not agree with the death penalty? Does not agree with it. Who all agrees with it?
Well, doesn't have action at all.
Who don't care?
No, I care.
Yeah. It's hard to balance out what you Well, I've got to, yes, ma'am, Judy.
My opinion on capital punishment, I don't believe it. You can do just as much as keeping them in prison for the rest of their entire life. If they die and come back again, get life again. But I'm saying I don't agree with the capital punishment at all. Just keep them there in prison. You never get them back out again. And I think that'll do just as much mental harm to them as to their families as killing that person. Just because one person made a mistake of killing somebody else, who gives you the right to take their life too? Because they did that. I don't believe in that.
And there are some people that believe that if you for the death penalty, if you kill somebody, then it's best for them to be out of society, because if you leave them in the prison, they could kill again, even in prison.
What? Go ahead.
There's different positions on it. I think the pastor have a robust debate about that. But my my position is that, you know, Paul basically was a murderer. And when God, you know, when God did what he was going to do with Paul, and Paul became a saint, if he's living in this day and time because he murdered, would we still kill him? If we killed him, we know that we would be killed as Christians. We know that we would be killed as man of God. So we don't know when someone's heart has been changed. They could kill somebody, they could sin. But if they ask God to forgive them, they're forgiven of that. And then as a man, do you have the right to take their life? Right. God can take life. God had to do judgment in the Old Testament, but he's God. God knows the heart. God knows everything. He knows, he knows, whether you're going to change or whether you're not going to change or whatnot, because he's seen the beginning and the end. But man doesn't. And that's where, when we take a life, we just take a life. We don't know whether that person is converted, not converted, or anything else. So it's something to debate about, but that's what I've always felt.
We're not all debate about
God is life, and David was a murderer as well, because he didn't know the actual job. He said, I'm a murderer. He was a murderer. Amen.
I was going to say this statement to the Bible says God cannot kill, and of course, the Lord did come to fulfill the law, but at the same time we're under grace of Jesus Christ going to the cross. But I think that when somebody takes somebody's life, that they should be isolated in a place for themselves and give them the Bible to read, and not give them pleasures of TV and all that kind of, where they can just sit there and let the Lord deal with them and work with them.
Okay.
I think that it can be a little different at the cost. Before kids come on, we become almost different law. Kids that are on the grace and on the safe. And be careful what they can do there. Well, the reason is mine.
We don't be judged.
So let me give you a couple of little tidbits and then we'll move on with the lesson. It says that these are a few facts about capital punishment. China keeps their execution numbers a great secret. So nobody knows how many people they execute.
They kill all the time.
The guys of death penalty. The United States, the U.S. of A. is ranked 5th for their numbers of executions, country-wise, per country. We're ranked 5th in the country of all countries. And there are 21 countries that carry out the death penalty sentence. So that's something we want to think about when we dive into this lesson. Is if like you were saying, Ms. Adrian, if it was today, what will we do with these Israelites? Is God put a judgment against the Israelites? Is it fair? I mean, God did it. He's all knowing. He's God. He can do what he wants to do. But does it seem fair for what's happening? Let's read the background passage.
After repeating the same depressing cycle, sin, servitude, supplication, salvation, 7 times over a period of almost 500 years, the time of the judges, Israel was in terrible condition. Many reasons could be cited, but one stands out. The decadent nation was led by corrupt spiritual leaders.
This is the whole
Yet, according to the first chapters of 1 Samuel, even in the midst of this mess, God was working and in control. Behind the scenes and in contrast to the times, God was preparing a godly young man named Samuel to provide a new kind of leadership for his covenant people. Samuel would serve not only as the last of judges, but also as a prophet, speaking God's truth to the nation wallowing in sin. In chapters 4 through 7, the judgment of God comes as prophesied to Eli's house at the hands of the wicked Philistines. In that same attack, the Ark of the Covenant is captured and taken to to Ashdod, whereupon its presence results in punishment for its Philistine captors.
Anybody have a comment about that? The only comment I have about that is back up in the first paragraph. It says the decadent nation was led by corrupt spiritual leaders. People have a tendency to follow the leader. Whatever the leader is doing, if the leader is being holy and godly, in general, I'm not saying specifically, but in general, the people will try to be also. So, and if you look at our nation today, if the leadership is all corrupt, anybody in the cabinet, they're going to blame it on the leadership anyway. People will use that as an excuse to do what they want to do, change the laws and everything to do what you want to do. So people generally follow the leader of they follow the pattern of the leadership, generally.
I have to make another point too. Some years ago, they took a person's life and killed this man. And 40-some years later, I was up in this man up in Louisville, he confessed to killing the man, and they had already put the individual dead. So see, that's another thing. A lot of times things are put on people, and it was somebody else, and they confessed to it years later before they leave this world.
That's right.
So that's another
Because he
reason.
was clearing his conscience.
Yeah.
And I don't know if y'all heard of the Monica 7, but they killed 7 guys, and then at the end, years later, before she died, because he was supposed to, 7 guys were supposed to have raped this lady, and they killed them, they hung them all. And at the end, before she died, the lady who said that they did all, said that she was just dating one of them, and her family had found out, so that's why she had said it was all of them.
Well, Miss Linda, that's why they created the Innocence Project. Because there are so many people sitting on death row that before DNA became a relevant part of any trial, there wasn't anything to prove that a person was not there. And now that you can prove that a person, and see, that's what the thing is, the prosecution has to prove that the person did it. Your defense doesn't have to prove that you did not do it. See, that's what people get mixed up. If they can prove that you were at the scene, that's how. But if your DNA was not there, and we've got so many men, and it's an unfortunate unbalance. There's a disproportionate of African American men sitting on death row that they're finding that in North Carolina alone, 37% have questionable cases, the highly questionable. So you got to go back through the court system and see if you can even have a retrial.
Right. Wow. And I even had a deputy sheriff. He just told me, he said the judicial system is corrupt. I mean, everybody knows it, but to hear a guy that works for it say it's flawed. It's really disheartening. So.
Yeah, it's flawed. We've got some issues that, have been in place since the nation decided to be one nation, so we've got laws that go back that far. You probably have some problems.
So let's look at any other comments, questions? Let's look at, we're starting with verse number, 1 Samuel chapter 4, verse number 10.
So the Philistines fought, and Israel was defeated, and every man fled to his tent. There was a very great slaughter, and there fell on Israel 30,000 foot soldiers.
Does anybody remember how many soldiers died in the first battle? I think it was 4,000 men died then. This time, it's how many?
30,000.
30,000.
Big difference.
There's a big difference. So this is the beginning of the judgment that God put on Israel. So the Philistines fought, and Israel was, number one, they were defeated. And fear set in because everybody fled. Okay? The rest of the ones that survived didn't want to die, they fled. And so it wasn't just a slaughter, it was a great slaughter. So that meant it was massive. And even we are allowed to know how many men died in that battle. It was 30,000. And this was all because of corrupt leadership coming from the top. But the corrupt leadership, you know, they just didn't want to follow God's laws, God's rules and God's laws. And so everybody has to suffer. No, some people had to suffer. Everybody was suffering at that point. Do you think this is a fair judgment?
It is because God knows the beginning and the end. So He knows, you know, what you're gonna do, what you will do, what you won't do, what you want to do. It's like it's like if we saw a picture, if we watch a picture show, and we watch the start of it, we watch the end of it. When it comes back on, we know what's going to happen. So if we say that guy right there is the murderer, and somebody say, well, how do you know he ain't killed anybody yet? We had already saw the picture. Well, that's what kind of what God is looking at. So He can render judgment like that since He already knows what we're going to do.
Right.
I mean, you know, he already knows. So I mean, that it's kind of almost beyond our comprehension, but it's fair because of that. It would be fair if we did it because we just guess it. We don't really know.
We don't really know. Amen. Any other comments? Okay, and Romans 6:23 says, "For the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life in Christ Jesus our Lord." So there has to be some bloodshed for disobeying God. And remember, they took the Ark of the Covenant in the battle with them, didn't they?
Yes.
So there are several reasons why God had to really judge the situation, and He's fair in His judgment. He's not an unjust God. But just to read this like it was a book, it would just seem so unfair. And you hear these people say, well, why would a loving God, do such a terrible thing? But you have to peel back the layers and find out what the root problem is. And the root problem is disrespecting God and sin. That's right.
But at the same time, He give us, like He did us so many times, I didn't give a chance to repent. And it causes hardships one lot of them, but you know, they return to it, but they go back.
Go back. That's right. Go back.
Verse number 12. Anybody please read that?
This man of Benjamin ran from the battle line the same day and came to Shiloh with his clothes torn and dirt on his head.
Okay, what does this signify the Lord God allowed us to know how this man was dressed. What is that? Lamenting and mourning. All right, thank you. So he ran from the battle line. Everybody else, 30,000 people got killed, but he survived. You know, there were a few that fled the tent, so he was one of them that fled. And if he came, he didn't come, you know, looking all good and everything. He looked raggedy and worn out, because it says that his clothes were torn and dirt on his head, meaning that he was in mourning. He was unhappy. And he was running, so that means he was trying to get somewhere to deliver a message. Any other comments? Verse number 13.
Now when he came, there was Eli sitting on a seat by the wayside watching, for his heart trembled for the ark of God. When the man came into the city and told it, all the city cried out. Then Eli responded,
Well, yeah, go ahead and read that question.
did Eli really love the Lord? Why or why not?
Any comments? Did he really love the Lord?
I think Eli loved the Lord in the beginning. I think he loved the Lord in the beginning, but then he kind of got complacent. Because he watched his boys started doing stuff that he knew was not right, and they were, you know, having sex with the women coming to the temple and that kind of stuff. And he told them to stop, but when they didn't stop, he didn't go any further. You know, he saw them, you know, taking the meat to sacrifice meat, and they'd take the best meat and leave the old, you know, the kind of rough looking meat for the Lord. And he told them, stop, don't do that. When they continued to do it, he didn't go any further. He didn't execute any judgment on them. He just, you know, got complacent. And they were giving him some of the good meat, and he was like, well, you know, it's already done. You know, he was complicit in it because, you know, he was kind of going along. And so I think he started Lord for granted.
And isn't that like us? If you, some of our family members are committing a sin, and we know it, but they've already moved in with the person now, so we might as well just not say anything. There's no excuse. We still need to, sound the alarm no matter what, if they moved in or not, I'm just using that for an example.
That's good enough.
So, but it was interesting to me that we see Eli, and what is he doing? He's sitting there, and he's watching, but it says that his heart trembled for what?
The Ark of God.
The Ark of God. I thought that was kind of interesting that his heart was trembling for the Ark of God. It didn't say it was trembling for God. It was trembling for the symbol. Right.
Because he knew that, God had his orders, he knew that God kind of wasn't with them. I mean, they always prayed, and, God would tell them he was going to deliver, he would deliver the Philistines, or he would deliver, Babylonians, he would deliver them into their hands. But this time, God wasn't with them, and they took it anyway.
So at this point.
So he knew, he kind of knew that they was on treacherous ground.
Right. So at this point, you said you believe Eli loved the Lord at the beginning. So right at this scene right now, what would you say Eli's barometer towards loving the God is? 0 or 10? 0 to 10?
Well, I think at this point that he realized the danger of what his son had did, because they stand behind this Ark of the Covenant, and they wasn't doing right. I mean, the Ark of the Covenant was good on you on the boy side protected, but they were doing all this, and Eli knew it.
Yeah.
And I know they had a effect on him.
And remember,
They made him shaky.
he had the prophecy too that his sons were going to die the same day.
About 3 out of 10.
3 out of 10.
He's still no Lord.
And so how many times, we take our chances with the Lord too. We think we're slipping by and getting by with stuff, even in our thought life. We think just because you let us get by, 15 times on that 16th time, and we get smacked down, and then you have people running up, calling up Pastor Woods, calling up deacons, and calling up best friends, and mama and grandmama saying, "What did you tell me? Well, you got warned, you was warned like 15 times before." But anyway.
Eli, he comes to places, and he just quit trying to correct them, and all this guilt come back on him, the storm will come on. His son,
That's right.
respect on him.
At this point, he didn't know how many had gotten killed. So let's keep on reading. He heard Eli. Okay, let's go to verse number 14.
When Eli heard the noise of the outcry, he said, "What does the sound of this tumult mean?" And the man came quickly and told Eli.
Go ahead and read 15.
Eli was 98 years old, and his eyes were so dim that he could not see.
Okay, so here's Eli sitting by the way. His heart is trembling for the Ark of the Covenant. He's 98 years old, and he is what? Almost blind. His eyes were so dim that he could not see. And so that's just a picture of the Israelites. Israelites have been spared a long time. A long time. But at this point they were spiritually blind because they were continuing to do the leadership. The priests were doing the things against God that God was obviously had to pronounce judgment over. And so Eli is kind of a picture of where the Israelites were at that moment in time. Had grace for a long time, and now things would get, just get so rough and dim and dark. They were already dark, their minds were already dark. So, does anybody else see anything in the scriptures that
I was thinking too, during this period, people lived a lot longer. So 98 wasn't really that old then. For us it sounds old, but people then were living
I mean, Sarah had a baby when she was, so, yeah.
As it moved closer to the New Testament, people
Yeah,
short.
short.
And then they all of the New Testament restored years to see it.
Big difference in Methuselah.
Time didn't do
And so let's move on to verse number 16. And somebody can read that one for me.
Then the man said to Eli, I am he who came from Babylon, and I fled today from the Babylonians. And he said, what happened, my son?
So there's always going to be somebody there to proclaim what needs to be said. Eli was sitting there expecting, and God provided somebody for Eli to find out what happened. And so the man, he said he ran. Eli could not see that this man's clothes were torn and that he had dirt on his head. He couldn't see that. But what he could hear, Eli, evidently was nothing wrong with his hearing. He could hear the urgency in this man's voice. He could hear the urgency in his voice and the passion and the sorrow in his voice. So, sometimes when you lose one step, the other one pick up. And so Eli, he heard the outcry. He heard people crying out. He wanted to know what was going on. It's a bad thing to be, amongst people and everybody's doing something you can't see. Somebody has to tell you what's going on. And so this man comes from the battlefield, and he tells Eli, where he came from. He said, I fled. He was not ashamed to say, I fled. And I fled today from where? The Babylon. The man wanted to live, but God spared his life just so he would go to tell Eli what needed to be said. What he needs to tell him. And so Eli, of course, this captures his attention. He says, and what happened, my son? So now Eli, his heart is already fluttering. So now he really wants to know what is going on, because there's some things that he needs to find out. So let's find out in the next slide. Verse 17.
So the messenger answered and said, Israel has fled before the Philistines, and there has been a great slaughter among the people. Also, your two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the ark of God has been captured.
Okay, let's pick this little verse apart.
Yeah.
So the messenger had this to say. Israel has fled before the Philistines.
That's the horrible part.
Okay, that's bad. That's bad enough, right? Israel has been defeated.
That's supposed to be the sinning, the worst people on earth.
Oh yeah, and you know what? The Philistines, I was looking, and I found out that the Philistines, they had the most sophisticated weaponry around, all the metals and everything, and so they were fierce. But remember when they found out that the Ark of the Covenant was back with the Israelites? They got even more indignant. They said, we got to have more courage than this. So they they pumped it up a little bit. So they went out and fought even harder. But in them fighting harder, with the Israelites having the Ark of the Covenant with them on their side, so they thought, do you think that they kind of slapped back a little bit? When you think the Lord is on your side and He's letting you do your own thing, you even do more sometimes. You don't try as hard when you think, to get things going your way. And so anyway, the messenger said, the Israelite has fled the Philistines. That's bad. The second bad thing that happened was there had been a what?
Great
slaughter. A great slaughter. He didn't tell him how many, but he said a great slaughter. So he knew before it was 4,000. He knew it was more than 4,000 this time. And so that was bad enough. Also, your two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead. That's three. And here comes the last one. And the Ark of God has been captured. So that was bad news all the way around, right? How much can a 98-year-old man take? How much more can he take? But guess what? How would you have reacted to that news? You think about Job, he had a whole lot of bad news in one day. He had more bad news than this in one day.
But that last thing was condemning. That was condemning to him. Because, he's supposed to be the priest. And if the Ark of God has been captured, then he's not the priest. He's not doing the job. God is not with him. So, that was the condemning part. He might have felt like, well, there's some things I can do better, or I can ride along. But when somebody captured the Ark of the Covenant, that's basically, you're not doing your job. You're not the priest anymore. You're not in touch with God.
So that's like,
that's like Cave on the doors. He's condemned right there.
Yeah. So, I think I would have been sad, shocked, in disbelief, and scared. All of it. All at one time. So we're going to see what happened to Brother Eli. 18, verse 18.
Then it happened, when he made mention of the Ark of God, that Eli fell on his feet back by the side of the gate, and his neck was broken, and he died. For the man was old and heavy, and he had judged Israel 40 years.
Let's talk about this for a little bit. Okay. The messenger said, number one, he said, Israel has fled before the Philistines. Was Eli dead then?
No.
Then he said, and there has been a great slaughter among the people. Was Eli dead then?
No.
Then he said, your two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead. Was he dead? Did he die then?
No.
So when did Eli fall dead? When he found out the Ark of the Covenant had been captured. That's when he fell dead. He could take everything, but he couldn't take that. That was just too much for that old man. Because God, his head was that big. His head was too big. So let's look at that verse then. Okay. And Sister Barbara read, she said, and then it happened. Now, I love that statement, and then it happened. It's just like, the next step in the movie, and then it happened. Like it's the dun-dun-dun-dun moment, absolutely. And then it happened. When he made mention of the Ark of God, that Eli fell off the seat. How, not forward, he didn't fall forward, but he fell backwards. It's such a shock. This reminded me, I'm silly. This reminded me, remember Fred Sanford? And he would never stumble forward. He would always stumble backwards. Stumble backwards. And so Eli stumbled backwards. He didn't stumble, he fell off the seat backwards. It was such a jolt, such a shock to him. But it's almost like he knew it was coming. He might not have known it was coming, but it's almost like it was God.
Yeah, no matter how big his head was, he was so heavy and big when he fell all that weight. His body and broke his neck. His body was so big.
But he said he fell up against it. If you fall backwards and your head hits the gate and you snap your neck, I don't know. He said it was heavy. Why was he heavy? Because he was eating all that meat. Y'all keep that in mind. He was heavy because he was eating all that was heavy there.
The sacrifice
This is kind of silly too, but I wonder if that's where the nursery rhyme Humpty Dumpty came from.
You know that you have tried to do your best. It's not such a great run, but here he took a guilt of what he didn't do, and all this come on his way to work. This is like somebody taking a sledgehammer and all this knock you off because this guilt that going on, his son, that was going on, but when it comes that the Ark of the Covenant had been carried out, that was a God-fearing thing. That was laid heavy on him to be in charge of that. But he didn't do it.
Yeah.
And that really come heavy.
And so we're looking at his weight Because the Bible it's mentioned it twice that he was heavy, right? And so the weight of sin, not just the weight, but the weight of sin. Sin can carry you down, down, down. Sin can make you look older than your age. Have you ever been, people that you went to high school with, college with, but they number down through life, and you see them leading such a rugged life, and you look at them, you say, my goodness, what happened to them? Sin happened to them, because sin will weight you down and wore them away. And then you see somebody that has been in sin, comes out of sin, comes to the Lord, starts living for the Lord. They look like a new person. They look like new creature. They look like a new creature. Exactly. Because they are.
I thought too, when you look at that, not getting worse, so that's forward. You're the man who did wrong, and you're the man who had did wrong, but all the stuff on home and how he took it, and he profited from it,
Yeah.
And then he didn't fall back and die.
That's
Right.
Even when his wife.
Even when his wife suggested it. Yeah. Exactly. So Eli, he cared more about, the condition of his son than he did the position of his relationship with the Lord, with God. So now we see that his neck is broken and he died, for the man was old and he was heavy. And he had judged Israel for how many years?
40 years.
So you think about leading a whole nation of people for that long and sliding backwards. And Pastor did a sermon on the slippery slope or something, sliding, the slow slide or something. Whatever. But anyway, it didn't just happen. It happened slowly and over time. And he did not recommend his youngins. He just allowed it to happen. And one thing going back in the previous chapter was when those servants came with the fork to get that meat out of the pot. It wasn't just a 2-pronged fork; it was a 3-pronged. Because they made sure they were going to get something when they stuck it in there. They were making sure they were going to get something. And it is more strict when you stick a 3-pronged fork in something than a 2-pronged. When you stick it in there, it's going to come up and it's going to come out. So they knew what they were doing, and they did it with all the joy that they could have. But they paid dearly for it with their lives. Okay. So they ate the stolen meat. They disregarded God. You just can't get ahead when you're sinning against God, because God, He'll let you get by for a little while, but not for long. And also, this goes to show you something else too. I mean, I'm speaking to myself. When evidently it's the sin of gluttony, right? And so the sin of gluttony is not healthy for anybody, because if the man hadn't been so heavy, he might not have. There are other incidences in the Bible where, somebody fell on a dagger and it pulled his intestines out, and, because he was heavy, he couldn't get it out. Y'all remember that?
I remember that.
Okay.
Roman killed and slipped out.
Right. So, just word to the wise. I'm speaking to myself, Okay.
Thank you.
Verse number 9.
Now his daughter-in-law, Phinehas' wife, was with child, due to be delivered. And when she heard the news that the ark of God was captured, and that her father-in-law and her husband was dead, she bowed herself and gave birth, for her labor pains came upon her.
Have you ever heard of account of that somebody was in such shock that they had to birth and trauma? Stress and trauma, because not only was her husband dead, but her father-in-law was dead, and the ark of God was captured. So this was the things that the leadership was doing was far-reaching. It just didn't kill those 30,000 people. It affected the people that were the children, the wives, and everybody else. So sin is contagious, and it's eating cancer. So it says that now his daughter-in-law, Phinehas' wife, was with child. So you know what? That was another generation of children that would have been growing up under that leadership had this, and so she was due to be delivered, so she was very pregnant, and when she heard the news that the Ark of God was captured, and that her father-in-law and her husband were dead, she bowed herself and gave birth. And so that, to me, that signifies that sin is painful. It's not only hurtful, painful, it's painful. And she gave labor. For her labor pain came upon her. Shock and grief caused the labor.
And when we study the Bible, it's something in there that covers, cover our entire life, cover, when we travel from birth to death, something in there. And, we hear spur around and spoil a child. Spur around, spoil a child. But in here it explicitly says that, that those two sons were the reason that this happened. And because Eli didn't correct him. That's us now. We've got a job to do. When we tell our children, we need to tell them. We can't make them, but we just need to be stern. We need to be stern and we tell them over and over whether they like it or not. We got a job to do. We got to tell them that, we can't participate in what they're doing is wrong. Like we can't condone it.
Right.
Like I said, if your son or your daughter wants to, try to shack up, so to speak, to someone, you don't have to let them in your house. Do it in your house.
Right.
Like you were saying earlier, sometimes people say, well, they don't do it anyway. And I'd rather they be here where I can watch them rather than somewhere else. I'd rather be here where I can keep an eye on them than somewhere else and all that. So you just, kind of condone them all that. When we study the word, it's explicitly tells us that, we participate in it.
Yeah, I've got, I work with a lot of different people and, meet a lot of different people. And some people that I know of, their children are college graduates now, got boyfriends and girlfriends. And the parents let the boyfriend stay in the home, or the girlfriend stay in the home or whatever. It may be in a separate bedroom, but, what is that saying? I mean, you say you're a Christian, so where you going to draw the line? But they're grown. That's what I'm told. They're grown.
The Bible speaks about the start when the young are small, and as they grow, they'll get this. It's really rough when you wait down your kids up 16, 17, 18, and you're going to change what's like. It's their start while they're small. And one time I really heard my teacher, this boy got married, see a girl. She was a long time she got married, and she was going to change this man. He's up in his 60s now.
Oh, man.
He's in his 60s. She was talking about, she thought like she could make a change in life, but you have to be careful about that because he messed around and it was all war out there. It was great for us. He let her die cruelly. So this was it. Even when we go out what the Bible said, start when they're small, that's the best time. Because waiting till they grow up, it gets rougher and rougher. And they start talking back and they do more talking.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm also thinking about her giving birth. Okay, her husband just died. It was a very dark period for Israel. Her husband just died. She gives birth. Okay, if Phinehas is dead, then the Ichabod immediately becomes the heir because everything is done in generations in Israel. I mean, that's a dark time for this generation right there.
Heir to what?
Heir to sin. To the sin that he left behind. This is what I mean. Look at what he's heir to. Look at what he left, the legacy he left for his child, for his son.
Wow. So we see here that, okay, we know that all sin is against God. All sin is really against God. And so God cannot leave it untouched. I mean, he's not going to tell a lie. God is going to, he has to judge it. He has to judge. And he had given them what? Well, how Eli's reign? How long did it? Okay, giving them at least 40 years. 40 years. It's a long time.
Try to get it right.
Wrong one?
It's a long time to try to get it right if you don't get it right. That's why, and it's, I guess I shouldn't be, but that's why it's so hard to be able to see older people in a deep, deep sin and not trying to get it right. That's difficult for me. But I know everybody's in their own thing, you know, but it is hard. 40 years is a long time to be in the sin. When you look at people that's 16, 7-year-olds that's in deep sin, you know, blatant sin out there, that's hard for me. When are you going to get it right? I mean,
Well, the way I see it is, people, well, you know, their eyes are blinded, their heart turns hard, but in the initial onset, people sin because they really love that sin.
Yeah.
They really do.
Gotta take care of flesh.
Yeah.
They're taking care of flesh. And I just find it sad that they pass it, and she's passing it on to your child.
yeah.
You know, that's what makes, he said, this woman had this baby, she's in shock. Okay, she just found out her husband's dead, this baby just comes out. It doesn't say if she was at term. You know, we don't even know if it was time for the baby. She went into labor because her husband was dead. That's, you know, that's what it says. It does not say that this was time, and it was time.
Yeah, it says due to be delivered, but it didn't say
Yeah,
when.
But, you know, we get tied up on and blinded on the worldly things, not do so well. So kind of be like when we was in Sodom and Gomorrah, even Lot's wife, she was loving so good that she would go out, she don't look back. We look back, we should look back there. And these things tie up, because I know people sometimes get tied up with money. I told my uncle one time when he called me in, he had been blessed to go through World War I and made it back home, even though he didn't get married, but he got in the way a lot of time working on the farm. I got money on my work. That's true, get out of the way, so the rest of us had to work.
Yeah.
But, you know, the thing was, the dreadful thing about in 48, just before the grandfather died, I was born, that he said he was ready to go. Call and show me. Then, because I got married, I was thinking 6 days, my uncle. I just haven't worked all day, and I know he was sick. He said, Jay, I just messed up. What'd you do? Well, you know, I said, why? You gotta change the correct it.
Yeah.
And I thought maybe he was gonna say, because, you know, he didn't get married, you know, the Bible speaks about he was harmless, married. And there was no children, nobody, so he was just, you know, always in the evening, stacked up money, stacked up money. And he came out and he said, when you go over to Wolfsburg, you put his money in a box.
Wow.
You know, that way you don't have to pay a tax. They're not going to let you get your money. I said, you know, you get right with God, that's the part, because your brother can get this other. And they did, you know. And then I said, well, you know, it's bad sometimes. There's a lot of people, they get hung up on that, on the money. Remember this guy? He would have good value everything and make good money. And he was such a he paid his wife just to leave.
Wow.
Paid $1,000 back then, leave it. And he went and sold his Bible that next day, you know, and it brought him good money. He was such a to get back home with some more. And he run this stop sign and killed this young man and himself. Well, who's going to get somebody else going to get this?
Yeah.
You know, we're not going to care, like Joe said, I brought him in this world. So I didn't want to get too long about this. I thought about that when we get hung up on the things of this world. And really, somebody else is going to take care of it. And the Bible said, who knows what the next man doing?
That's right. That's what you're going to do in a great war.
So while Eli was sitting there on the wayside, and he knew what he had done, what he had participated in, and how he had, along with everybody else, being superstitious, thinking that just the presence of the Ark of the Covenant was going to save them. They presumed that God was going to fight the battle for them, which he did. He allowed 30,000 men to die. And Eli was sitting on the side of the road. It doesn't say anything about Eli repenting, asking the Lord to forgive him.
He didn't have time to repent.
He was anticipating some
No, he
news.
didn't.
He didn't have time.
And we were sitting on the side of the road.
He was waiting though. He was waiting. He had
Waiting for some
time.
kind of news.
Yeah. He was waiting for the news. He wanted to know what was going to happen. So
But he knew his sons was going to die.
yeah, he knew his sons was going to die, but he didn't know. He was afraid. He anticipated. He was afraid what was going to happen. He knew what was going to happen. So he had time to repent.
What Jude said, when he got that news, when he heard the news, he didn't have time to.
You have to
Like he said, all the other bad things that he was hearing at that moment, he could handle it. But when he heard that the sound that the ark was captured, God judged it right there. His time was up.
But at the time, they looked at his life condemned him because why he had the time to correct those sons, at least when they were small enough. He kind of played around and ate and got fat, and enjoyed it, and when the last minute, sometimes you don't have time. That's why I told one of my friends I worked with him in Hickory, he said, oh, I can just repent like that. But this is true. I can never call. But you may go like that. That's right. Sometimes you don't have time to repent.
Sometimes the devil ain't just come back.
That's not true.
So let's move on to verse number 20.
And about the time of her death, the woman had stood by her, said to her, do not fear, for we have four sons. But she did not answer, nor did she forget.
Some people can be so depressed and so bogged down and so grieved. I mean, this is when you have no hope, when you feel like all your hope is gone, this is what it looks like. You cannot respond to anybody that's giving you any hope, any joy, any thread of hope. But she didn't respond, and after it says, and about the time of her death, the women who stood by her said to her, because she gave birth, but yet her life was ebbing out of her. She gave life, what I'm saying, she gave birth to the son. And it was a great thing for the women during that time to have a son. It was supposed to be a joyous occasion. But she didn't have any hope, because where was the ark of the covenant? No, captured. And so her hope was captured. So you see how sin has affected her? How the sin of the leaders all trickled on down to this woman laying on her deathbed. No hope at all. And they were trying to encourage her, don't fear. They felt like it was her fear. Maybe they thought that, she was now a widower, and widowers didn't have it so good, and she had this baby to raise, but they were telling her not to fear. They were trying to give her some encouragement.
But Minister, that's like being in the middle of the Iraqi war, 9 months pregnant or whatever she was, and somebody coming up to me telling me Doug is dead. I mean, we have to make it real. I like to make the Bible real for me. That's my husband. That's who I look at every day in the morning. And you telling me he's dead, this baby comes out. This is big. This is huge. I'm probably gonna leave now. I'm probably I'm out of here. Y'all just bury me.
So there is such a thing of willing yourself to death.
Yeah, that's shocking.
No hope. Verse number 21.
Then she named the child Ichabod, saying, the glory has departed from Israel, because the ark of God had been captured, and because of her father-in-law and her husband.
And so, Ichabod means the glory has departed. So, is that a fair name for it?
Yeah.
You think about the name of people's names.
God told them to name that child that to remind them of what they had done.
Oh, in verse 22. Go ahead and read 22.
Oh, and she said, the glory has departed from Israel, for the ark of God has been captured.
Now, getting back to the almost to the original question. Let me go back. The ark of the covenant was gone, but God hadn't gone nowhere. So they were just, acting as if they had no hope. Because their hope was in the facility, the box, the box, and not God. Just like people today, they have confidence in their job, we have confidence in our boss, we have confidence in people, things, but what's our confidence in God?
But they had reasons to. They had reasons to. God's presence, rested in their ark.
God told them to watch over
Yeah,
the ark.
I mean, when they took that Ark of the Covenant in the battle, and God was listening,
Yes.
it was like God's presence was with them. And they saw miraculous things happen. They win the battle and they didn't have to fight. So, I mean, that Ark of the Covenant was special. When David was carrying it in and the guy reached up and touched it, he didn't this one. They touched it because God had told them a certain way to handle it. They were supposed to slide the handles in and carry it with that, through the pole and not touch it and everything. And so God's presence was represented by that. And once the Philistines captured it, it was like they knew that God's presence was not with them. God's presence had left them. So, they had reason. They wasn't need to pray right there. They didn't get some things right. They didn't get some things right and ask for forgiveness.
But too much is given, much is required. So God had given them that ark to watch over. He gave them specific instructions.
Right.
And when you don't follow his specific instructions,
Who told them to take who decided to do that? To take the ark out there?
That has been proven over years when they were with the Lord that he watched over them. That Ark of the Covenant really meant something because God was with them. But Israel realized in many years that when God was with them, they won their battle. But this time, God was not with them the way they were doing.
And usually he would tell the leader would give the edit for the ark to go out there. But most of the time, the leaders were following God closely or following what God said to do. But Phineas and Hophni, they were doing their own thing, and Eli was just kind of.
And the Philistines, one time the Philistines took the Ark of the Covenant in there. And they put the Ark of the Covenant beside their God. They put it beside their God. They got something. When they come in that next day, they got them laying down on the metal. They put it like that. So they straighten their God back up. They got to put it beside, put it beside the Ark of the Covenant again. So when they put it in that night, when they got up the next day and come back, they got to lay down, not always lay down the body was the center part of the body was there. The leg was broke off, the arm broke off, the arm broke off. And so they still kept the Ark of the Covenant and they started having all kinds of, plagues. They started having all kinds of plagues and sicknesses and stuff like that. And then they wanted inquiring, how do we get rid of this Ark of the Covenant? They sent that Ark of the Covenant back. And they started having all kinds of plagues and stuff. So God's presence was with that ark. And the Philistines found out, you know what? We don't want this ark to go. That's what they did to cow. I won't get it all into it. You got the cow too.
But at the point, because of the corrupt leadership, God had to pronounce judgment. He cannot continue to he not speak out of it. He not do something. So was that punishment too severe? Why not?
came from God. He knows. Like we can tell his dad. Like watching a movie. He knew what was going in.
And if he didn't really show them, he may not have believed. He had took the ark from him and killed all that he killed. Just killed like, what's the first time? 4,000. They said, okay, well,
continue on. But anyway, I thank you guys for coming out because you could have been somewhere else, and especially because of the weather. People may have slacked back a little bit because of the weather, but God saw fit that the sun came out and we were able to come out and have a good lesson. So I really do appreciate you coming out. So hands good. We're going to end the Bible study. We're going to turn it back over to the hands of Deacon.